Oh, welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we're doing the absolute ultimate exam cram session, covering foundational cybersecurity terms, threats, and fundamental defense strategies. So whether you're studying for a massive certification or you just want to bulletproof your own digital defenses, we're breaking down the exact concepts you need to know. But right off the bat, ask yourself, are you actually ready to pass this thing? Cybersecurity isn't just about hackers in dark hoodies typing furiously in a basement. It's a highly structured discipline built on very specific definitions, frameworks, and continuous risk management. So grab your notebook, get comfortable, and let's get focused. All right, let's take a quick look at our itinerary for today. We've got 5 core modules to master: foundations of cybersecurity, exploring the threat landscape, common application vulnerabilities, fundamental defense strategies, and lastly, the NIST cybersecurity framework. Let's kick things off with Section 1, Foundations of Cybersecurity. We really need to lay down the rules of the game with some essential flashcard-style vocabulary. First up, we have asset. An asset is literally just the target we're trying to protect. Now, it's vital to remember that this isn't just data. While a database of customer information is absolutely an asset, physical computer machines, servers, and even the software applications themselves are all assets that require a rock-solid protective strategy. Next is threat. A threat is basically any incident that can cause a negative outcome for your assets. Now, people always assume threats are malicious, right? Like a criminal hacker or a phishing attack. But for your exam, you have to remember this. Threats can absolutely be accidental. An employee mistakenly deleting a database, a random hardware malfunction, or even a fire taking down a server room. Those are all completely valid threats. And here's where people often trip up on the test. Do not confuse a threat with a vulnerability. A vulnerability is the actual security hole or weakness in your system. Think of things like a server misconfiguration, transmitting sensitive data in plain text, or just a missing software patch. The vulnerability is the open window. The threat is the burglar actually climbing through it. Okay, you will 100% see the CIA triad on your exam. It's basically the holy trinity of security: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Confidentiality keeps data secret using things like encryption. Integrity protects that data from being maliciously altered. And availability ensures authorized users can actually access the systems when they need to, which is exactly why things like backup generators and data redundancy are so critical. Moving right along to Section 2, exploring the threat landscape. Now that we've got the vocabulary locked in, let's look at the different types of attacks out there. The absolutely crucial distinction to master here is the difference between active and passive attacks. Active attacks are loud, they alter system resources or disrupt operations. Think of a denial of service attack crashing a web server, or malware actively encrypting your files. Passive attacks, on the other hand, just silently monitor system information without affecting resources. A perfect example of this is packet sniffing, where an attacker quietly captures data as it moves across a network. You might not even know they're there. Now, malware, or malicious software, is guaranteed to show up on your test. Let's break down the heavy hitters. A virus infects a file, but make sure you memorize that a worm is specifically designed to self-replicate and spread entirely on its own. A Trojan horse doesn't self-replicate at all. It relies on tricking you by disguising itself as a totally safe application. And finally, bots are automated processes that often group together to form massive malicious botnets. So, who's actually carrying out these attacks? They essentially fall into 2 main buckets. Outsider threats are initiated from outside your perimeter. These are your classic remote hackers. But insider threats, those are incredibly dangerous because they originate from personnel who already have access to the system. Keep in mind for the exam, an insider threat can definitely be a disgruntled employee, but it can just as easily be a well-meaning coworker who accidentally falls for a phishing scam. Let's dive into Section 3, Common Application Vulnerabilities. We need to understand exactly how these attackers are exploiting software. To do this, security professionals look closely at the OWASP Top 10 list. OWASP represents this massive industry consensus on the most critical risks facing web applications today. The most common one right now? Broken access control, where systems just completely fail to enforce user restrictions. You also really need to know injection flaws, where malicious code is sent through web forms, security misconfigurations caused by insecure default settings, and the massive backdoor created by just relying on vulnerable or outdated third-party components. All right, with that rather terrifying threat landscape fully outlined, let's get to Section 4, Fundamental Defense Strategies. Time to build your defensive playbook. Your absolute first and honestly most important level of protection is effective cyber hygiene. It relies on repeatable, common sense practices. We're talking about promptly applying software updates, using strong and unique passwords, turning on multi-factor authentication everywhere, and regularly backing up data to an external drive. And because humans are so often the weakest link in the chain, ongoing security awareness training is totally non-negotiable so your team can actually spot modern phishing scams. A brilliant way to execute this is by building a defense-in-depth strategy across 7 layers of cybersecurity. Right in the very center, you have your mission-critical assets, the core data you absolutely must protect. As we move outward, we layer on data security, application security, endpoint security for our devices, and network security. At layer 6, we establish perimeter security, which includes both physical and digital boundaries. And finally, the ultimate outer boundary is the human layer, which requires phishing simulations and strict access management. And that brings us to our final module, Section 5, the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. This is the absolute gold standard of risk management. What's really fascinating about the NIST framework is how it maps its core functions in a wheel. It's a simple checklist. Actually, scratch that. It is absolutely not a checklist that you just finish and walk away from. It proves that security is a continuous, concurrent process. These functions all relate to one another, and they have to be happening constantly to form a real operational culture of security. Let's walk through how this builds a complete life cycle across 6 functions. It starts right in the center with govern, establishing your organization's overarching risk management strategy. Then we identify our current risks and assets. Next, we put safeguards in place to protect those assets and implement systems to detect anomalies and potential breaches. When an incident inevitably happens, we have to be ready to respond to contain the damage. And finally, we recover and restore normal operations. Mastering each of these 6 buckets is absolutely vital for your exam. All right, to wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final thought to test your readiness. Ponder this mock exam question. If an organization fails to apply a critical software patch, does this represent a threat, a risk, or a vulnerability? Think back to our foundation module. A missing patch is a vulnerability. It's the open window waiting to be exploited, not the burglar itself. As you keep studying, challenge yourself to categorize every single scenario you read about into these distinct buckets. Stay curious, keep reviewing, and good luck on your exam.